All right, what is going on, everybody? I messed up a bit. Well, not really messed up. I worked longer than I really planned to today because I got a little bit behind in the content uploads, and it is 18:30 now as I look at the clock, and I wasn't able to get out, a video on time today. So this is me trying to kind of make up for it a little bit. I've got content that should be dropping Wednesday, Friday, even Monday and Wednesday of the next week. So we'll be kind of back on track with the whole 3 day per week schedule. But the video I was gonna put out tonight would have had me up way too long, and I gotta get to bed, be up by 4:35, and back to work so I can keep on top of things and accomplish my goal of getting my Performance Model 3 between March and April. My plan as of right now is to order on March 1st and take delivery whenever it becomes available. I've got a plan all cracked out, numbers and everything, and I should be good to go by then. As long as I stay on top of my grind, my work gang, and I will be doing everything I can to get the content flowing in that same veins. That way the channel continues to grow, which it's been awesome to kind of see the views and the subscriber count, everything sort of going back up again because the channel had been neglected far too long. That being said, we're here today looking at my RoboTaxi Report dashboard, or CyberCab dashboard, or, Rideshare dashboard, whatever you want to think about. So this is part of the bigger FSD community tracker that has been kind of talked about today, because it was brought up again by Holmars in a way to try to undermine it, make it seem not relevant, because he's got a bone to pick with this thing, because Elias and I and all the wonderful contributors that have been working so hard to build a platform for people to be able to see what's actually going on with FSD has invalidated a lot of folks that run with their hype train and, just talk anecdotally from the things they're experiencing in their car, because FSD does a lot of really awesome stuff. I love it. I use it all the time. A lot of you already know that. You've been following me for a long time. Those of you who haven't, check out the YouTube channel, CYBRLFT. If you're seeing this on YouTube, cool, dive in. There's a whole lot of customer reactions. I'm approaching 100 videos interacting with actual rideshare customers. There's a playlist too of these RoboTaxi reports where I go over what I have seen patch to patch and how things have changed since back in 10.2 days, late 2021, getting into 2022. So Elias and I have been doing this for a very long time. True fans that have been way back and seen from those early days, or even contributed to the early tracker, you've seen how it's changed and grown over time. And Elias is the mastermind behind these dashboards and how they look and how the data is presented in a way that's, more intuitive and sensible. Back when I started this, I was pen and paper and very crude, but detailed, accurate, because my goal was always to hit this from a scientific approach, record every drive I do, every disengagement, and actually be able to track what's going on with FSD. And it's been a hell of an adventure, and it pains me, it pains Elias and I both when we see all of this work and all the people who have contributed and gone out of their way to build this crowdsourced data. It hurts to see that shat on. It's going to happen. There's always going to be skeptics. There's always going to be people that are, even in the realm of haters, there's a lot of those. I think it's healthy to be skeptical. I don't want to go on this rant too long, but anything you're looking at, don't take it at face value, whether it's from me, whether it's from someone like Omar, or, anyone you're used to hearing. You should never just run with what you're told. It's always good to sort of, add a grain of salt to it, kind of compartmentalize it maybe a little bit, fact check it later, look into it, verify your sources, do that little bit of diligence and work to make sure that you have the actual truth in front of you, and be willing to realize when you're wrong or when something is actually different than you thought. That is part of just being a mature adult. That is part of the scientific process, and peer review and everything else. All that said, this is my part of the dashboard that is automatically integrated into the big FSD tracker. The link to this is right on my X bio. So you can go in and you can click around to all of these options, look at everything, look at the different software builds, how they've compared my time in California to my time in Florida, everything. You can go in and play with it, and please hit me up on X with questions or in the comments on YouTube. Let me know what's going on, what's going through your head, what the numbers may mean, what's going on with this donut. Ask. We love this. We love talking about the nerdy part of FSD. That's why we got into this so heavily. Elias and I have been data bros for years now, and we'll continue to do this regardless of whoever says whatever, however many followers they have. That's irrelevant, because at the end of the day, data factual truth, it always beats out feelings and emotions. The only emotion I really care to talk about is the excitement that drove us to get into this in the first place. And I am still, yes, on hardware 3. I know it sucks. I am happy to be able to provide that feedback, that experience, and report on this data for the millions of people that have hardware 3 and however many of you have FSD or use it. I know that a lot of us have felt left behind. We're wondering what's going to happen. Are we going to get a free upgrade to hardware 4? I've quipped about paying for hardware 4 upgrades. That opened a whole can of worms. I get it. People who paid for FSD, I totally agree. You should get the upgrade for free. I was just expressing my desire to have version 13 so that I can put it on a dashboard like this for everybody and actually show the delta, the change, the difference between here version 12.542 and version 13 that's in the hardware 4 cars now. That's honestly kicking ass. It is okay to say that something is not perfect. It shouldn't cause like a visceral reaction and like trigger you to say that version 13 isn't ready for prime time. You know, and I haven't tested it myself to see how it handles my area. I'm sure it would do really well. However, I also apply that same healthy skepticism and think that, all right, can it handle everything perfectly? You know, I will put aside my hopes in favor of getting the measurements and seeing what happens. So we're at 176 trips with dedicated customer rides. And this is going to be kind of a casual flowing through of this to get out some content for y'all and to explain this dashboard to people who might be new. So this might not be as comprehensive as some other videos. I don't want it to go on for too long, but please hit me up with questions. I want to do this kind of thing more often, especially now that the channel is kind of getting back into a flow and there'll be more of these data reports. But this top bar here is the RoboTaxi results, just as it says on the page. And while you're watching this video, if you click into the actual dashboard, you can follow along or whatever. I'm going to do more live streams in the future too. That was a lot of fun. But you can see this blue bar is the volume of drives, meaning how many trips were completed on that build. And not every trip that I log throughout, because I have rides by myself. And I also have rides that don't really qualify as a customer trip because the system didn't turn on properly, navigation took too long, customer wanted a new route, there was a limitation, like it was raining so hard you couldn't even turn FSD on right away. So there are criteria for it counting on this RoboTaxi results list, which I can actually bring up in a more designated way here, a more focused way so you guys can see it. All of these rides were from customer pickup to customer drop off. The car did the trip. Whether or not it succeeded should be pretty obvious, is whether or not I had to intervene or help it. When it comes to things like a courtesy nudge on the throttle just to kind of get us moving through a stop sign, or if we're going a little bit slow, I just want to kind of like speed us up a little bit because we're, you know, maybe going 3 or 4 miles below the speed limit, that isn't counted as a trip failing condition or a RoboTaxi results failure. That is just courtesy nudging. But if the car is not moving and requires me to tap the throttle to get going, that is a failure level intervention. So this is a more strict metric, and I've said that in pretty much every RoboTaxi results video I have gone over. When you're looking at these higher percentage success rates, that is extremely impressive. You know, early version 12.3 to 12.3, 4 was doing really good. We were in the 80s and 90 percentile, was really, really good in a kind of a consistent fashion too, because we had the outlier of 11.4.2 back in version 11 days that for my car, it was just owning it all through San Diego. I could not explain what was going on. Elias and I were both scratching our head. And then with the next update, it tanked. But with version 12, when it came out, that was the first time that we were like, oh man, like these are some impressive numbers that are staying there. Like that's really good. And then some interesting stuff started to happen when we got into 12.3.6, 12.5.4.1, 12.5.4.2, sort of the divisive era of going to hardware 4, 12.5.6, 12.6, version 13, and what hardware 3 has kind of been stuck with since then. You know, in the next day or so, we're supposed to get 12.6. It's another reason I also kind of wanted to bring this up and kind of talk about what we've already done. That way, with 12.6, it'll be a little bit more fresh in your minds. And when we look at what it is, or we look at how it's different, it'll be a bit more readily available in everyone's memory. Because I don't know if I'll hit 200 trips. I made a joke on a post on X a little while ago that, you know, what'll happen first, getting 12.6 on hardware 3 or hitting 200 dedicated customer trips. So we're still climbing, you know, 176. I don't think I'm going to get to 200 before then because, long story short, in order to make enough money to acquire my goals of getting the new car and get all the bills paid, I've had to switch up my tactic for how I take customer rides. So the rides I'm looking for are typically a lot longer. Most of my rides now that I'm trying to get, I'm looking for over $30 for a trip because I can end up wasting an hour plus on 15 bucks, or I can spend an hour, hour and a half on 40 to 50 bucks. Not a whole lot of rocket science behind that. And that does mean that there is a bit of an influence that happens when it comes to the RoboTaxi results, because now it is sort of leaning toward that longer trip model, and it has for probably 2 weeks, and I'm averaging maybe 4 rides a day, 5, maybe 6, 4 to 5 pretty much is standard, because by the time I get them where they're going, it takes an hour and a half. And then I usually charge up to get enough energy to take the next customer a long distance without stopping. So the timing in the day and everything works out that I only get to about 4 or 5 customers. And these are all rides that are probably greater than 50 kilometers. I actually had a comment from somebody on YouTube that it was a really good question. It asked what might be the reason for this insane downtick in success that has happened on 12.542 compared to the previous ones. And we were already kind of trending down, but this was pretty significant. I mean, 51% success rate over 176 trips is not great. That means there's a 50-50 chance that I'm having to take over. And he actually mentioned if I've changed region or changed anything about the trips. And that got my science geek brain kind of moving. I was like, ooh, I like this question. This is great. Because yes, something has changed. I have sort of been forced to target longer rides in order to make adequate earnings. Longer rides, that means that there's more time for there to be a problem, which could lead to an oversaturation of failure on trips of that certain length. So I hit up Elias. I pitched him the idea about being able to show this in a way that can differentiate the trip length too, to get an idea of how that is going. And that is one of the beautiful things about having all of this data that I've input in here that we've collected for years and being able to create tools to parse out that data. So another reason I wanted to do this tonight, and I love it if you're still here watching, is to show off a new tool that I hope everyone loves called RoboTaxi Results by Distance. Check this out. So he made it to where you can see the mapping of all the trip success rates in categories of less than 10 kilometers, between 10 to 30 kilometers, and then greater than 30 kilometers. That's awesome. And what you notice is that overall performance is pretty in line. You know, they're correlated well. Like, there's not a certain trip length that just makes the system freak out. This is kind of what you would expect there to be a consistency. But what you will notice when we start to look at this, so trip success for trips less than 10 kilometers, of course, this is the darker blue bar at the top. They have a much higher success rate. And you can see it at the end here. This is really cool. Trip success trips that are fewer than 10 kilometers have an average success rate of around 73%. Trips that are 10 to 30 kilometers are at about 60%, 59 right here. And the trips that are longer than 30 kilometers, which are the majority of my rides now, only 30%. So this is an incredible way to separate that and see what's going on. And it matches our hypothesis. I had a feeling that because you're driving longer distances, and this isn't that hard to think about. This is just a simple logic. The farther you're going, the more chances you have for things to get screwed up. And the more chance there is for something dumb to happen, like a staging error or any number of disengagements. And we can look at the causation map to kind of parse that out a little bit better. Whether it's legal, staging, a general skill issue where it just does something dumb, or false positives, any of it. This is a great way to see how that stretches over different trip lengths. And it is pretty intuitive. You would kind of expect that the shorter trips are probably going to be the most successful. It'll be more challenging for a cybercab or robotaxi to take on long hauls. And I wouldn't even say 10 to 30 kilometers is all that long. The trips that I'm doing now can go from like Central Florida to Tampa. My first customer today, we went from basically Winter Haven all the way to St. Petersburg, all the way to the coast, and a 2-stop scenario. And sometimes I'll be taking people all the way out to Cocoa and then all the way down to Vero Beach. I've been all the way up in Jacksonville. Like, the trips are a lot longer. So watching this tick up in the right direction, or meaning the direction we want, in the positive direction, is going to be so exciting to see. Because we're going to be able to tell how it's performing in the different length categories. And maybe I'm just a hyper geek, which is why I'm so excited about that. But this is awesome. I mean, mad love to Elias for all the hard work he does. The guy deserves a lot of respect and love for the hard work he puts into this. And he doesn't have to. Like, this is a passion project because we wanted to be able to measure FSD and share it with everyone. This isn't a bunch of guys that are like trying to figure out all the things that are wrong and make it look bad. It is, like he put on X today, quite simply a bunch of nerds that are just collecting data and seeing what it tells us. That's how this goes. And then you can compare and you can look at different builds. You can look at what's going on across the board. On our disengagement side, I'm overly excited, my apologies. We have our critical versus non-critical, which critical getting into legal concerns with excessive speeding, traffic control violations, whether or not going down the right side of the road. You know, anything that would cause you to get pulled over, cited, you know, that's on the legal side. And then general safety, like avoiding potential damage to persons or property. You know, that's what the yellow bar is. The yellow bar going up and down the screen is the distance until you encounter a critical scenario. And it's not been the best for me down here. There's a lot of speeding issues on this build. It's especially when there's a car that's running up on my bumper and FSD decides it's going to run away from that car and fly up 30, 40 kilometers an hour in speed. It's not good. That's not good. That's definitely getting you pulled over. But there's a myriad of things that are happening on 12.542, and I've got more videos coming out kind of talking about my general pet peeves with this build. And in the blue is just the distance we're getting before a non-critical disengagement, like missing a turn for navigation for customer trips, which is a strict metric, I get it, but that is the level I'm grading it on my dashboard here. This is all just me in my car, to be clear, everything you've seen here. The big tracker includes my data as I am one of the contributors, but the big tracker is a lot more cumulative and all-encompassing of all the testers in different regions across the US. This dashboard is specifically for myself and my car Mew and everything that he does, and eventually we'll have two cars to compare with Mewtwo. I can't wait to see that direct change and difference between the two. But I'm going into causation as well on this tab. You can see these are how we're parsed out the types of disengagements. And over different builds, we've kind of changed the specificity because sometimes certain things would just pop up as being a big problem, like the roundabout category here, which isn't really an issue anymore. It hasn't been an issue in a while. The FSD just completely owns roundabouts, and in any case that I've encountered them, false positives, goodness, usually is when you have an issue with it wanting to slam on the brakes because detecting something in front of you that isn't there, or even stopping for a stop sign that isn't yours, anything that causes it to think something is happening that's not happening, that requires a disengagement to continue. And then, of course, excessive speeding should be obvious. Discomfort means like it got bad enough that it's jerking you around that you had to take over, and that's really quite rare now. I haven't had too many discomfort problems, not since getting version 12. Even the latter portion of version 11 felt pretty good. Human isn't as common either. The system is pretty good at dealing with people, and usually if there's a reason I had to disengage because of another person, there's actually a more important underlying cause to that. Legal, kind of, it's the original blanket term that included excessive speeding, and then, you know, traffic control and stop sign, stoplight kind of stuff. Obstacles is basically anything in the road that you might hit if you don't take over. You know, your random couch that might pop up on the highway. Maps is actually like a continuity issue between navigation and what's actually going on. Like it might not see that you need to take this exit, so it's going to pass it, or it might not recognize a new turn or a new median that was put in. Skill issue is kind of a catch-all for anything you know the system can do, and for some reason it just kind of craps the bed and doesn't do it right, or like you might be mid-U-turn and then it decides to bail out and go the wrong way. That actually happened with Tesla Mojo and I when we were doing the Lake Hamilton unprotected left, when Mew was supposed to do a U-turn and decided he was going to turn right into the oncoming traffic lane going the wrong way, and I quickly had to take over. Not great. And system error is something that I have only encountered on this build through extensive hard pushing, hard testing, a lot of pressure. You guys might have saw the video with the heavy rain at night when I finally got that red wheel. I got another video coming out because I managed to make it cry again under some extreme conditions. But on my car, the threshold seems to be super high and kind of hard to make freak out. So that's been really cool. System limitation is anything the car just can't do yet. That would probably more so encounter like really bad weather conditions where you had to take over and it can't turn back on. If you get the red wheel, I kind of relay that more to a system error. Not being able to do a U-turn in the past when it was on the map was an example of system limitation. I'm having a bit of a brain fart on some other examples that I know for system limitation. I'll try to take a mental note of that so I can have some better examples for you guys in the future. But it's basically anything that the car doesn't have coded in right, or hasn't learned through its vision training through the neural net, because it's not human coded anymore, especially for version 13. An example would probably be the sort of impromptu construction, traffic redirection, or gesturing that's eventually going to come when you have to take over because the person holding a stop sign or guard or saying slow or whatever, somebody who is actively acting as traffic control, the car isn't able to really recognize properly. That's probably one of the best examples I can think of for a system limitation. So it's not a critical issue. It's more so well, the car can't do it yet, so you can't really be all that upset about it because it's just not even in its capability set or its skill set. But that pretty much covers everything here on the dashboard, and I've ranted quite a bit. I hope you guys enjoy this and have questions for me. And please, again, this is on X in my bio, and you can get in there. It's also in the description of the YouTube videos. You can go in and you can look at all this yourself without me clicking on anything. You can look at specific builds, see all the data and stats around every build you click on. You can hold control and select multiple, and you can just look at how everything's performed in those patches. You can see the overall of everything that I've done. Of course, if you unselect everything, it just shows it all cumulatively. 130,000 total kilometers on FSD, and all this stuff is the actual time that FSD is engaged. I don't count time that the car, like I'm just in the car and it's not on. I only specifically count, time it's on, like gaming or flying, operational hours, which is actually over here at 2.2 thousand, 2,200 hours on FSD. So I love this stuff, and I love being able to geek out and talk about all this. And it is not, like some people have pointed out, this is not indicative of fleet-wide performance over the billions of miles that are collected. But I'd be willing to bet that this is very close. If you were to hypothetically take all the data of all the drives ever and somehow overlay it to the big tracker, I bet it would be a lot closer than some of you think. So that being said, I hope you guys do enjoy this and maybe understand a little bit better the thought process behind getting this data and why we actually care so much, and maybe realize that, we're not a bunch of people that just want to make FSD look bad. It's such an erroneous, illogical take to have, and it just seems disingenuous when that's usually coming from people that are trying to pump the stock. It's like the opposite of Dan O'Dowd, but not in a good way. So I will end it there, guys. I appreciate all of your time and all of your support and all of your well-wishing. I look forward to many more to come. Y'all have a good night.